This year was immensely exhausting to be a woman. I was finally diagnosed with two unrecognized disorders that will change and impact the rest of my life. But interestingly enough, the more I began to research, the more I wanted to tell my story, in the small hopes of making a small impact to others. As sadly, I'm only 1 in 10 women that share this disorder. Throughout my entire life, I recognized that my body was a tad different. I was highly active in sports, swim team, water polo, track, and yet my body did not quite tone up like it should. I was always a bit chubby and slow to lose weight. Additionally, my first period came late. So late, in fact, that I started lying to my friends about getting one simply to avoid feeling outcasted from the norm. When I did get my period, they were frightening and horrific. I would entirely bleed through my pants on multiple occasions, suffered horrendous cramps, and then they would only come a few times a year. Continuing to adulthood, these cases did not stop but advanced further with grief. I experienced extreme hemorrhaging in public places. Picture a public gas station that looked like a murder scene. Periods lasting for weeks on end, and my weight was slowly climbing with little change in lifestyle. I know what you're thinking. Go to the doctor. Well, I did. A few of my scenarios were so frightening that I took myself to the ER in desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. While the pills existed, the visits were often embarrassing and made me feel guilty. Female nurses didn't believe me, and the male nurses were dismissive and told me it was completely normal to have irregular menstrual cycles in your 20s. I even remember one creepy doctor at the VA proclaiming, "Everything looks perfect. You will have plenty of babies upon a simple pelvic exam." Fast forward a few years, and my patience was running thin. After having 2 blood transfusions for extreme anemia, I knew that something was larger than just being in my 20s with irregular periods. For one, I wasn't in my 20s anymore. So I finally took the time to dive into some serious research and had an idea of what condition it was, more than likely. After mustering up some courage and self-pride, I researched a well-reviewed OBGYN and made an appointment. I had mixed feelings about this day. Upon hearing my story and all the symptoms, she didn't hesitate to say, "I can imagine you realize by now that you have PCOS." I smiled back at her and nodded. I mean, in a way, it was relief. I finally had the answers to the things that I had been searching for. But on the other hand, I was panicking. What would this ultimately mean for me? PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, is a condition that affects women's hormones that creates a variety of symptoms and conditions, to include the growing of cysts along the anterior line of the ovaries. This leads to irregular menstrual cycles, difficulty becoming pregnant, excess hair growth and balding, unexplainable weight gain, depression, memory loss, increased acne, and contribution to long-term health risks such as diabetes and heart disease. While birth control and lifestyle changes can improve the symptoms, the condition does not ever go away. My emotions are still all over the place. Every time I go in for a vaginal ultrasound and see the cysts growing, my stomach twists. I attempt to express genuine happiness at a baby shower, but I end up crying withheld in anger afterwards. Every time I have to meal prep my gluten-free, sugar-free, soy-free, dairy-free meals, I want to scream. I know this sounds silly, but it's like you want to declare, "Why me?" to the universe. Am I going to have to live like this for the rest of my life? The reality is, though, I am not the only one with the same situation and frustrations. 5 to 10% of women, or roughly 5 million women, have PCOS. It is the most common hormonal endocrine disorder amongst women. So why aren't we talking about it? Why is it that so many people don't know what it is when it is the most common cause of female infertility? According to Sasha Ote, founder and executive director of PCOS Challenge, PCOS is one of the most critical, underserved, underdiagnosed, and underfunded conditions affecting women's health. We need the help of media, governmental agencies, and funding sources to improve patient outcomes and save lives. Well said, Sasha. Even more so, the majority of doctors do not understand PCOS and leaves 50% of women living with PCOS being underdiagnosed. This is dangerous. Simply put, more than 50% of women with PCOS will have diabetes or prediabetes before the age of 40. And the rise of a heart attack is 4 to 7 times higher in women with PCOS. Our cultural standards do not like us to talk about female issues. Older generational men are so uncomfortable hearing about them, and women have been told to keep them private. More so, our standards of women have been driven by the capability for her to produce children, or if she chooses to produce children. Ultimately, this is my first lesson. We need to mind our own darn business and stop asking women when they plan on having children. How do you know this is not already trying, lost a child, or that possibility has been removed for her biologically? When I decided to be my own advocate and do my own research regarding this disorder, it was one of the best things I've ever done for myself. Now I get to speak to other women throughout the world that share the same frustrations and stories in my own. It is so empowering. especially when I got my second diagnosis this month. I have Hashimoto's disease, which is a thyroid and autoimmune disease that causes the same symptoms and long-term health risks as PCOS, except now my body attacks its own white blood cell count. Well, I lost it. I ended up breaking down in tears at my drug test for Lincoln County School District, true story, and bit my mom's poor head off for not understanding my feelings or telling me that her and my grandmother potentially had both disorders. It is an inherited disease, but yet neither of these women were officially diagnosed either. So I ask again, why are we not talking about these things? Following the recent news, I reached out to the women on my social networking group that I knew would understand my thought process, and unexpected news of the double whammy. With no surprise, I was blessed with a variety of uplifting stories and encouragement for all of us that suffer from PCOS and Hashimoto's disease. Here are just a few. I have Hashimoto's. My biggest thing was getting my medication right. If you don't see a specialist yet, I would switch to one. I'm 29 weeks pregnant after trying for 3 years. Catherine, North Carolina. Thyroid disorders and PCOS frequently go together for what I have learned. We are 4 times more likely to have a thyroid disorder if you have PCOS. Miriam, London, UK. Hashimoto's and PCOS here. Hashi has been with me for over 12 years, and I believe PCOS for the same length of time, just masked by Hashi symptoms. Currently undergoing IVF treatments now for secondary infertility. Robin, California. What do these stories mean? Well, there's still a chance for us, despite the negative circumstances and setbacks that we have been dealt. While all our stories and circumstances are a bit different, we all have the same underlying goal: to be healthy and talk openly about our issues. Not be ashamed of women's health problems. It is not our fault, and ultimately it affects men too. I do not run up and down the street with a sign declaring diagnosis. I have the ultimate goal that I will not be ashamed. If it is talked about more frequently, perhaps doctors would be pushed to learn more about PCOS and other infertility diseases, such as Hashimoto's. This is how research development is drafted, by creating the demand. Ladies, let's unite together and be our own advocates. We must aggressively fight to find doctors that listen and stay on top of scientific research with medication and lifestyle changes. Additionally, we must empower each other to never give up or lose hope in our desire to improve our health.